Hey, bienvenidos a Vox Terra. So if you are from New York, send me a message asking me to highlight for you a call to action from a group called New York Renews. And what they're all about is New York Renews is a coalition of other environmental groups. So whether you're from New York or not, watch the show because the New York Renews includes groups like Sierra Club, a national group, 350.org, and really interestingly, National Young Farmers Coalition. And I thought that was pretty neat because, who's going to argue with farmers? Well, so if you do live in New York, they're asking you to call New York Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and the Speaker of New York Assembly, Heastie. And what they want you to tell them is something like, I support New York Renews' call for $15 billion in the New York State budget for climate and environmental action. Specifically, I want to see this thing called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act actually funded. Now, a little background here. This Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was passed back in 2019, and it was pushed for by groups like New York Renews and environmental activists like us, people making those phone calls, sending those emails. So point one, that's the power of activism. Point two, I don't think that thing ever would have got passed if New York wasn't controlled by Democrats. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, hey, Democrats, Republicans are all the same. And there's some element of truth in that, but I can tell you for sure Democrats are more responsive on environmental issues and have been for years now. Well, so here it is passed. But New York Renews is warning us, hey, it might not get the funding it needs. Well, look, if you're like me and you're thinking, $15 billion, wah-ba-ba-boo, I'm going to walk you through this, okay? Why I think, you know what, if you live in New York, just make the call. And if you don't, this is the kind of thing you want to ask for. So this act, or New York Renews, has got this broken down to four main funding baskets. Basket one, Climate Jobs and Infrastructure Fund. Now here we're talking about a shift, accelerating that shift towards a greener, less polluted, less toxic economy. Included in there, expanding offshore wind, electrifying buses and school buses, improving grid stability, making local microgrids resilient, and upgrading public housing energy. Well, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, even if somebody's still denying that pumping 40 billion tons a year of carbon into the atmosphere, which is around the total every year, is going to do anything to the atmosphere, well, it sure ain't good for you to breathe in. This stuff is all win-win. Think about those school buses. You ever stand behind one of them and breathe that diesel exhaust? Well, diesel exhaust and regular gasoline, it's all laden with particulate matters and benzene and other known carcinogens. Upgrading public housing, that sounds like that would save the taxpayers money in the long run anyway. Funding basket number two, Community Just Transition Fund. And here they're listing grants for local climate adaptation and resiliency projects. They highlight particularly in what they call frontline and disadvantaged communities and talk about projects like community cooperative solar and urban and rural food sovereignty initiatives. Well, let me start with that food sovereignty. That's pretty interesting. And that's defined as basically a local area producing their own food in an ecologically sustainable way. And I mean, that sure sounds like a win-win to me. Less shipping it all around, less dependent on supply chains. We all hear about that nowadays. Well, this business about adaptation and resilience, that's another win-win because even if we all can see the storms are getting more intense. They have been. You're getting heavier rainfalls, prolonged droughts. So resiliency really probably just means things like having natural vegetative buffers around your water bodies to absorb some of that flood water. Maybe what they call permeable pavement, again, to absorb flood waters. Basket three, Worker and Community Assurance Fund. Now here what they're talking about is basically what I've heard called just transitions or also helping people and communities that are dependent on fossil fuel income to transition away from it. Basket four, Household Climate Fund. So here you've got help with your heating and cooling at the household level and building level and also transportation costs. We're looking at energy efficiency in buildings and also what they're calling net zero emission heating systems. And that we're really talking about this technology called heat pumps, a really simple technology where these pumps are grabbing the latent energy in the air or in the ground. And in the case of geothermal or ground heat pumps, it's a little easier for me to wrap my head around. You think about how below the earth, maybe like if you're in a basement or a cave, there's like a stable temperature. So you're tapping into that stable temperature to heat and cool your home. So this all makes us less dependent on fuels to heat and cool our homes and to transport. Now, what's really neat about these baskets and New York Renew's take on it, I think, is that they're pushing back against what I used to hear when I was younger, and I still do to this day. A couple ongoing, I believe, false criticisms of the environmental movement and environmentalists. Well, one, it's jobs versus the environment. It isn't. Now, sure, if you dig in deep enough, we all agree. You're consuming, we're consuming, the society's just consuming way too much stuff. It's way too throwaway. So if you're really pinned it down to sustainable solutions, would we all have to be so busy? But in the short run, are you going to get your power by running a nuclear power plant, digging up this uranium and processing it? Or are you going to get your power by setting up some wind turbines? So really it's what kind of jobs, not environment versus job. Are you going to work on a farm where you're spraying pesticides all day? Or are you going to use natural farming methods? Now, criticism too is, hey, environmentalism is this elitist thing. Well, that's why they're emphasizing a lot just transitions, help with the workers, jobs creation, frontline communities. And another criticism that's popped up more in recent years is this horrible smear, in my opinion, that environmentalism is part of some plot to take away freedom. Well, that's why they're emphasizing local community solutions. Self-determination. And one smear not directly addressed but creeping up a lot in so many media outlets now is environmentalists are to blame for these rising fuel costs. Well, look, so much in this Climate Protection Act will in the long run lower fuel or lower energy costs because you won't be dependent on the falling price of gas. Gas and that kind of thing, it's always risen and fallen. This isn't a new phenomena. So instead of demanding lower gas prices and keep drilling and burning and drilling and burning, why not demand heat pumps, solar, wind, energy storage solutions? Now back to cost, New York News points out that, hey, the cost of not addressing climate is even more expensive than this $15 billion. And they also claim that what they're asking for is about 7% of the New York budget to be set aside towards climate. And that's going to come from reconfiguring current subsidies that government hands out. That's another point you got to keep in mind. As far as I can tell, there really isn't a free market. You got tax abatements, tax credits, and you always have. And the COVID pandemic, all this relief money's made that clear. But before there was the big auto bailout, there was the bank bailout. There's been other moments in history when it's been blatantly clear, look, this economy is subsidized. And the really biggest subsidy never talked about is called market externalities, meaning the cost of pollution is pushed onto the public. So back to those big school buses run on diesel as opposed to electric. Well, people are breathing in that exhaust, getting sick, in the long run, getting cancers. That's a real cost that's not factored into the cost of that diesel. So there's no free lunch here. We already got a subsidized system. Let's just switch subsidies towards a healthier, cleaner economy. And lastly, before I give you the contact numbers to call, if you're still feeling like you're afraid to ask for this, just remember, capitalism is a get what you bargained for system. That's all this is. And we are in a grand bargain with the vested, entrenched industries that dominate our media, our politicians, our whole society. You ask for a little, you're going to get even less. So keep it simple. It's important just to make your voice heard. If everyone lays silent, the politicians don't respond. If we make noise, they do. And these are the two people who New Yorker News is asking us to reach out to. Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Senate Majority Leader. Her number is 518-455-2585. Or you can email scousins@newyorksenate.gov, and I'll post you links. Speaker of the Assembly, Carl E. Heastie, 518-455-3791. Or the email, speaker@newyorkassembly.gov. And just tell them you support New Yorker News' call for $15 billion for climate and environmental action in the New York budget. Specifically, you want to see that climate, Leadership and Community Protection Act, fully funded, right? We don't want that thing to die on the vine. Well, hey, I hope you found this really helpful and you're a little more empowered now to reach out to your politician and just say this is what you want. Maybe you check out a group like New York Renews or Sierra Club and you donate to them. Hopefully you subscribe to my channel and you click the notification bell so you know when I'm putting up a new video. And until next time, and as always, peace be with you.